Advocating for an FASD-Informed IEP, a series of compact trainings for parents. This training was originally presented to a live audience in the fall of 2024 and have been divided into smaller sections here in order for participants to access the sections they choose in the order they prefer. Behavior Intervention Plans, Part 5 in the Advocating for an FASD-Informed IEP series. So next I want to focus on behavior intervention plans. So many students with FASD require behavior intervention plans, and yet many of the behavior intervention plans designed for them are not effective. Today, I just want to give you a brief overview of this so that can help you kind of focus in on how to advocate for your child's needs when you're creating this document. Again, when we think of that physical disability and accommodations, what kinds of things tend to come to mind? An example is if we have a student with low vision. So for these students, we don't sit them at the back of the classroom and we don't tell them, look harder. If you look harder, you'll be able to see the board. It doesn't make sense, right? It seems silly and goofy. And so if we acknowledge the physical nature of FASD and provide accommodations, then we can also change that paradigm there. Just like we're acknowledging the physical nature of the low vision disability, we're providing an accommodation such as seating them closer to the instruction, larger print. We're accommodating their needs, right? So that's where we want to start when we're looking at behaviors. Is there an environmental shift that we can make that will support this student in meeting our behavioral expectations? Most traditional behavior interventions, such as rewards, sticker charts, level systems, cognitive behavioral therapy, applied behavioral analysis, things like that, all rely on assumptions of skill sets that many students with FASD lack due to alterations in the brain that are subsequent to the prenatal alcohol exposure. Behavior modification and compliance-based techniques are not effective with this population, largely due to the difficulty in understanding cause and effect relationships. So students with FASD tend to have a lot of difficulty with understanding cause and effect, understanding the reactions to their own actions and what that might mean next time they do the same thing, right? I've seen some students that do seemingly well for a few days or even up to a week or so with some of these behavior modification methods and then are unable to maintain it. And unfortunately, that just reinforces the misperception that these behaviors are willful. Rather, it's the student that that the student isn't able to do the task that is being asked of them, right? Or that they're unable to do it effectively at the times requested. It's not that they won't, it's that they can't. And I want to note that that doesn't mean they can't learn. It just means they learn differently, and we need to accommodate those needs and structure their educational programming in ways that will effectively support their learning. So behavior modification systems, especially when publicized to the entire class, like a lot of reward systems and charts are used in elementary schools, can also be shame-inducing for students rather than supportive of positive changes. So again, we want to try to focus not on changing the student, but on changing the environment to support the student. And again, it's important to consider such things as those on and off days or moments that we touched on earlier. We don't currently have the capacity to change the underlying neuronic wiring that causes this phenomenon, but we can set up the environment in a way that allows for that variance in ability and responds with understanding rather than reprimands. So when looking at behavior intervention plans for students with FASD from an advocacy perspective, we talked first about evaluating whether it's truly needed, right? So are accommodations sufficient, for example? And if we decide it is needed, which can be helpful with regard to describing the student's disability before any concerning behavioral incidents occur. There are a few things to focus in on. Describing the student's needs in terms of disability symptoms rather than behaviors can help the team begin to shift their focus from behavior modification perspective to understanding the underlying needs caused by the disability. We want to use the terminology that describes how the behaviors are truly a symptom of the child's disability, so that it's abundantly clear to the IEP team when behavioral incidents are actually a manifestation of the student's disability. So describing in as much detail as possible the brain processes that are impacted in this student and how those contribute to the student's actions, choices, and behaviors can be really extremely supportive. Ensuring that the BIP addresses the underlying behavior, not the surface behavior, is a key component as well. So having a thorough understanding of what the true underlying behavior is, really getting below the surface level labels of kind of wanting to get attention or avoiding a task that are commonly used language in FBAs and BIPs. We want to look at why the student is seeking attention or why are they avoiding a task. And that's going to help us address the student's needs effectively. Are they seeking our attention because they're trying to communicate a need? Might they be avoiding a task because they didn't understand the directions or because they didn't recall how to do the problem, but they don't want to feel stupid in front of their peers by asking a question when they could do it yesterday? So we have to really analyze what's underneath that behavior. Because FASD is a brain-based disability, we can turn to neuroscience for examples of best practices and how to understand and address students' needs. And instead of traditional behavior mod techniques, we would want to, again, think brain, not behavior. So we can implement neurobehavioral approaches, which are those that consider the neurological impacts of the brain-based disability when considering behavioral interventions. Co-regulation is about modulating our own nervous systems so that we can effectively support students in modulating their own. That's another helpful technique. Accommodations, we've talked a lot about today, focus on how the student takes in information and or how they express what they know. And these approaches to behavioral needs are likely to be some of the most effective for students with FASD. Again, FASD now has a series of trainings on FASD in the school setting, and one of them focuses specifically on strategies and interventions. So we can include that link with the follow-up information for you if you're interested in that. The other advocacy strategy that may be really helpful for this is thinking of the BIP as being for the educators instead of for the student. So how do we set up the plan so that the educators and school staff know what to do when challenges arise to ensure that the student is supported effectively with co-regulation and provided the needed accommodations or environmental supports to help them navigate tough situations effectively, right? What are the interventions that the teachers, the educators, the staff need to use? I tend to look at behavior intervention plans as how are those supports implemented? This is for you as educators. This is how you can help support the child. Different reframe, a little different way of looking at it, but might help with creating a little different approach when you're writing things up. So this is a great chart that was created by Deb Everson, who works with students with FASD and other behavioral challenges up in Alaska for many, many, many years. And it's a helpful chart to share with the school when helping to explain the paradigm shift that's needed to understand that the students' behaviors are not willful disobedience, but actually part of their brain-based disability. So we can use this chart and these examples, so including the types of language adjustments that are included here when creating the IEP document, and the language that you use to talk with about your child makes a difference with regard to how the school perceives your student as well. So one example I wanted to share with you is from a student that I worked with many years ago. And as he began in middle school, he was describing to me how he was having trouble getting from class to class. And when he brought this up to the IEP team, they didn't believe him because he was getting from class to class most of the time. But when he described the actual challenge, it was that he didn't understand his class schedule and where his classes were. But he was able to self-accommodate because he was able to figure out which student in the first class also was in his same second class, and which student from that second class also had the same third class with him. And so when he switched, he knew which student to follow. And so it worked, and it looked like he was able to understand until one of the other students was absent. And then he couldn't find his way around and he didn't know where to go. And so it wasn't that he was purposefully tardy or trying to be non-compliant or avoid his class. He really didn't understand how to read his schedule effectively and remember how to get from one class to another. So again, looking at those underlying brain processes makes a world of difference, and really understanding that it was not a willful manipulation. Thank you for attending this training. If you have any additional questions, need more information, or just want to keep up with Healthy Minds, please feel free to reach out to us. This slide has information about our website, our social media contacts, and a direct email to our founder and director, Kelly Rain Collin.